All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to this PUI 2023 MOU and Budget Guidance webinar this morning. Happy Friday. I wanted to welcome you all this morning. Thank you for joining us. We are joined by KEB, Bethany, and Drew, who they can introduce themselves here in a second. They will be presenting on this session today for you all. Couple of housekeeping things before we get started. Just to introduce myself, my name is Kirsten Bayer, and I am with the Illinois Center for Specialized Professional Support, or ICSPS. It is a long acronym, we know. And I am the Digital Communications Manager there, and I am on this session for technical assistance and support. So feel free to reach out to me via the chat if you need any technical assistance during the session or even after the session. Speaking of the chat, everyone can go ahead and use that now and participate and chat any questions, comments, or concerns, or if you just want to say hello and happy Friday, feel free to do that. We also have the Q&A enabled, so you can ask questions through that. We'll take questions throughout the session as Bethany pauses, but we will also have time at the end of the session for questions, and we will allow you to raise your hand and raise your virtual hand and we'll unmute you if you have questions at the end, and we can have kind of that open discussion at the end of the session. This session is being recorded, and Drew is going to send out the recording to all the attendees and to the TAs, and then I can also send that out as well, Drew, to everyone who attended today. And we'll also have a follow-up email that will be in your inbox on Monday, and it will have a link to a follow-up survey. If you could take a couple minutes, we would appreciate your feedback on this session. So that way KEB can get that feedback. And then it will also have the link to the recording and the slides from today in it as well. So you will have access to everything at your fingertips from today. And I think that's all I have. We do have live closed captioning enabled if you would like to turn that on for accessibility reasons or just for your note-taking purposes. I know I like to have it on. And I think I'm going to hand it off to Bethany now to take us away.
Thanks, Kirsten. Good morning, everyone. I'm Bethany Yeager with KEB. I'm here with Drew Thomason, also of KEB. We're the neutral conveners and facilitators of the WIOA Interagency Technical Assistance team, the TA team. And today we're here to present on behalf of the TA team and all those who provided input to the guidance for the upcoming MOU negotiations, which start in January, if you can believe it or not. And they take effect, the MOUs that you're negotiating will take effect July 1, 2023. So this webinar formally issues the guidance for PY23 MOUs and the budget negotiations. And it is following up from a webinar that we had on October 12th, where we presented a draft version with the main concepts and got your feedback. So we're going to follow up today to kind of let you know how that feedback was incorporated into the final version that's being issued today. So first, I'll just offer some reminders about the context of PY23 MOU negotiations. Then we'll confirm the approach for the guidance that's issued to support you in those negotiations. I'll walk you through the MOU template. We'll offer a few tips about the one-step operating budget spreadsheet, which is also called the MOU budget. And then we're going to end with the Q&A. And as Kirsten said, you can type your questions throughout the webinar in the chat. We'll answer as many as we can today. Any we can't answer, we'll respond to in writing on behalf and with the TA team. And that will be updated in the FAQ after today's webinar so that we all have the same information. So please know that any questions that you have, we'll answer today. The rest we'll try to answer as best we can after today. So this is the first section. We're just going to offer a few reminders about the context of PY23. So for those of you who might be new, we just want to refresh what are MOUs. They are by law intended to serve as a tool to achieve integration. How are you going to work together? Both to offer services, make your services accessible through the one-step center system and the local system, as well as what financial commitments you're going to make that happen. So MOUs kind of document all that, and it's often the document that's called where the rubber hits the road. It's not the aspirational planning documents, it's the concrete commitment document. And the MOU is by law needs to document that these were good faith negotiations. All required partners were at the table, you all agreed to them, and you all committed on behalf of your programs the financial and human resources needed to do what you say you're going to do in the MOU. And there's a lot of decisions in the MOU. And again, this follows an MOU template that you know is required in Illinois. And that MOU template literally takes sections of the law and the regulations and applies them to what we are trying to help you comply with by completing your MOUs. So all the services that can be accessed, all the locations where your services will be offered, your method of service delivery, whether that's going to be through in-person staff, cross-trained staff, maybe virtual services or direct linkage technology, or any other combination of the above, how you're going to make your services available. That's a detail in the MOU. So are the role of the one-stop operators, and we'll talk about that a little bit about how it interacts, how the MOU interacts with your one-stop operator agreement. Coordination of referrals is a big requirement in WIOA, so there's a section on that, as well as your commitments to operationalize the service integration action plans, which is an Illinois specific requirement, but still within the principles of WIOA. And then all your commitments around how you're going to share in the cost of operating the centers and the service delivery system. So that's what's in the MOU, and that's what we're going to talk about today. A few reminders just about the dates. WIOA World has very specific dates. That just for clarity, the MOU negotiation period for the next MOU that will take effect is occurring between January 1st and then May 31st, 2023. So that's the negotiation period. Then what you're negotiating will take effect on July 1st, 2023. And the program year spans that one full year from January 2023 to July 1, 2023 to June 30, 2024. And for those of you who are less familiar with WIOA, that is the same as the state fiscal year. It's just the way that they determine the program year date is different, but it's the same technical time span. It's just called something different under WIOA. The other thing to note about PY23, again, that starts in July 1, 2023, that starts the new term of the MOU. And by law and under WIOA, the MOU can be good for up to 3 years. So the MOU you're about to negotiate will take effect in 2023, and then it is good through June 2026. So this is a document you're going to try to negotiate to span 3 years. However, again, WIOA requires that every year you have to amend your MOUs basically to attach an annual budget agreement. How are you going to share those costs? So that has to be updated annually, but the full term of the MOU is 3 years. So here's a reminder about the timelines that we're working under. I'm going to highlight 3 dates for you. The first is next month. So by the end of this calendar year, there is something called the pre-program year planning form. And what that really is saying is, how do you expect this negotiation process to go? What's your work plan? What are the key dates? Who's the lead MOU negotiator? Who's the lead and impartial budget negotiator? Who's responsible for reconciliation? And do your partners plan to request any waivers to any requirements to the governor's guidelines that kind of are the authoritative document for these negotiations? All that is due on December 31st, 2022. So that's step number 1. And it takes a little bit of planning, and it takes the involvement of your local workforce innovation boards. Step number 2 then is the next deadline, at least from the state perspective, is on April 14th this coming year. Usually it's April 15th, but that falls on a Saturday. So the report of outcomes is due on April 14th, 2023. And that report simply tells us, are your partners in agreement? If not, why not? And do you need some help? So that helps the state interagency TA team know whether they need to support you in reaching agreement. And the third date I want to highlight is that May 31st, 2023 date. In years past, the final MOU with all the signatures and the final one-stop operating budget spreadsheet were due on June 30th every year. But the new program year starts the very next day on July 1. So we'll talk through this a little bit more, but by moving that date up, that final submission date for your final MOU, final signatures, and final one-stop operating budget spreadsheet, by moving that up to May 31st, it actually hopefully prevents some of the headache around needing to require or collect any new signatures because they didn't meet the requirements of the Illinois Office of the Comptroller. And we'll talk a little bit more about what those requirements are. But that date to move up to May 31st is simply to make sure that you're compliant before July 1. And then the rest of the year unfolds. MOUs take effect on July 1st. Then by October, the state and the interagency TA team will let you know, are there any revisions that are required to your MOU to make sure that they're compliant? And then everything will be considered final by November, and the program year ends June 30th, and you have to start negotiating another budget before then. So that's how this program year looks, at least from an MOU compliance standpoint. So now I want to highlight some of the approach for the PY23 guidance. And this is guidance for your negotiations that begin technically next month in planning, in January in communicating with your partners. So the first thing to remember is that the state is required to issue guidance to all the partners under WIOA about how you're supposed to negotiate. And there's two primary reasons for that based on the law. The first is how you're going to make your programs and services accessible through the American Job Centers. And then the second is how you're going to share those costs to operate the local service delivery system, and specifically the comprehensive one-stop centers or specialized centers or affiliate centers. So in Illinois, this guidance that again is required by law is called the Governor's Guidelines. And that document spans 73 pages. It's primarily a compliance document. Most of the requirements come straight from the law and the regulations. Illinois did add some additional sections to guide you if you want to request a waiver for approval or to tell you about what the state level reviews are about. It provides glossaries and forms. So that document, again, spans 73 pages. So I'm going to show you that real quick. This is the document we're talking about when we talk about the Governor's Guidelines. 73 pages, includes all these sections. It outlines all the things that the law requires, as well as additional requirements in Illinois. And it offers you a lot of resources. I'm going to scroll down just so you get a sense that there's a lot of resources in this document. These are called the Governor's Guidelines. And I'm here to tell you today that this document, the 73-page document, is not changing. The requirements are not changing according to the Governor's Guidelines. What we are talking about today is guidance that's specific to the MOU template for PY23. And that's what's called guidance for program year 2023 MOU negotiations issued today. And it's simply telling you, hey, here's a heads up about what's in the MOU template that you're going to fill in for the program year that starts July 1. Okay, so the other piece of context that's really important for program year 2023 is that there's a lot of stuff going on. There's a big systemic effort by multiple groups to look at things that are really important, especially key learnings coming out of the pandemic. They have to do with equity and access, and human-centered design. So there's a lot of improvements that were needed anyway, and then the pandemic accelerated them. And they go from every level: the Governor's Commission on Workforce Equity and Access, IWIB Equity Task Force, IWIB Service Integration Work Group, which is working on recommendations more about business engagement, digital equity. So there's a lot of things going on that really do affect what the expectations will be of the system going forward. But we've gotten feedback over the years since WIOA started that required partners and local workforce boards, you request that you don't want guidance unless there's really clear expectations around what those changes mean in your MOUs. In other words, you're very challenged if guidance or requirements are issued but it's too vague. Then it challenges you to be specific about what financial and human resources you're going to commit to make that happen. So to avoid giving you vague guidance about these very big systemic issues like equity, access, human-centered design, and service integration, the PY23 approach for guidance and the MOU template is just to offer more technical improvements and hopefully more streamlined MOU template for you to use, knowing that all of these things are still under development. And they're just planting seeds. Everything that the system is learning and exploring right now is planting seeds for what's going to come to fruition, hopefully in a unified state plan in 2024, more than a year from now. So there's a lot of seeds being planted, but in the meantime, we do think that the MOU template can be improved to hopefully make your lives a little bit easier. And we have to be aware that there are ways that we can reduce some of the required revisions on you by going through the state level TA team reviews the MOUs every single year. And every single year, there's some common required revisions, and they're more nitpicky and they're more bureaucratic. We're trying to reduce those. We're trying to get rid of those as best as we can and still make sure that you're compliant. So some of the improvements for PY23 are more technical in nature, again, to try to help you. And also it's an interim approach as we wait for some of these more systemic recommendations to be issued about equity, access, and service integration. So that being said, the PY23 interim approach is just a heads up that maybe some more substantive revisions might be required in future versions of your MOUs. And so we're talking about program year 2024 or 2025, or maybe even 2026. So, and that's particularly around those systemic issues of equity, access, and human-centered design and service integration. So that unified state plan in 2024 really could provide a new lens for what is expected of the system and how we could all work together to make that a reality in your MOUs. So that's the biggest contextual piece. The other approach to the PY 2023 guidance is just to explain some of these streamlined approaches and clarify some issues that have come up in the past few years. So these 7 concepts that we talked about on October 12th are still the same. The topics remain the same, and they are now incorporated in this guidance for PY23 MOUs. And I'll go through them one at a time. So the first piece is that when we presented draft guidance in October, and in the WIOA webinar, there was a mention of the service integration action plans. And for a couple of years now, the MOU template has included a section that says, tell us how you're going to make commitments around your service integration action plan and make that a reality in your MOU with the human and financial resources to back that up. So that language became somewhat outdated. When we presented in October, we did get some feedback from you who were listening to the webinar that, WIOA requires a lot of plans to be updated. The MOUs, your regional and local plans, your one-stop certification, your reopening plans coming out of COVID. Then, of course, you have your service integration action plans, and it just felt like a lot, an administrative burden on you all. And meanwhile, it's acknowledged again in the comments that we received that the service integration work group is still conceptualizing the guidance for service integration specifically, and it's expected to issue recommendations later. So that was the comment we received, and it's fair. That's a fair comment. It's fair to say that WIOA requires a lot of these plans, and Illinois takes it a step further with the service integration action plans. But the fact still remains that those service integration action plans, according to state policy, are still required. And the timing to update those is really not. It's not as defined as an MOU that has to be updated every single year to amend the budget. These service integration action plans, the intent is to periodically talk with your partners in your workforce board about your goals related to service integration and what are some specific action steps you can take to make that happen. So that's as you update them, not saying that you have to update them, right now at this moment as part of the MOU, but as you update them, they should relate to your MOU about the human and financial commitments you're going to make to kind of deliver and carry out the action steps that you identified in the service integration action plan. So the language here that's in red font is simply to show you the edit that we made for clarity of what's expected of you, that as you update your service integration action plans, carry those through to your MOU commitments. That's all this is saying. And this is the clean version that's in the actual guidance about service integration action plans. As your service integration action plans are updated, then update your commitments in the MOU template. And there's a section specifically for that. The second piece of guidance has not changed since the October 12th WIOA webinar. The current MOU template has a section that's required by WIOA to explain the procedures if you can't reach agreement during the negotiation period. But we all know COVID taught us that we have to have a better understanding of how decisions are made any point in the program year, especially if things unexpectedly change. So this MOU section is updated to just say, don't just tell us your process of coming to agreement during the MOU negotiation period, but throughout any point of the year, and tell us and talk through as partners the role of the leaseholders, the one-stop operators, the local workforce boards, the state agencies that administer the programs in your area, and any local program administrators. Kind of just talk out those roles and who's responsible for what, especially as things change related to being open or closed or anything else that evolves during the program year. The point is, if you talk about this during the MOU negotiation period, hopefully it will be a little bit clearer and less stressful for you later if something does come up. This is the third piece of guidance, and again, it has not changed since the October 12th webinar. The state TA team reviews your final MOUs every year, and the intent of that is just to help make sure you're in a good position if you're monitored by either your state agency partners or by the Department of Labor, the US Department of Labor. It's just to make sure that you're in a good position if you're monitored. And almost every year, technical changes have been required. And again, like I said, we know these have been more bureaucratic in nature, but these changes, again, are supposed to help you make sure you're compliant and really living out what you said you would do in your MOUs. So this is the MOU template for this coming program year is hopefully a little simpler in the narrative section about your career service matrices, what career services are each program going to offer through the one-stop center, so that you don't get tripped up with inconsistencies about a career service matrix, which is that checkbox at the very end of the MOU template. There often was inconsistencies, and we're just that unintentionally set you up for failure sometimes. So we're trying to make the language clearer, and so that you really can keep that more updated easily. And I'll show you that when we get to the part where I demonstrate the actual MOU template. This is the fourth concept, and if you remember from the October 12th webinar, this is one that is not necessarily a compliance issue. This is a test pilot for future years. You know, while we wait for more standard and clear expectations around equity, access and service integration, let's talk about this and experiment a little bit as partners and as a system about human and financial commitments around coordinating the customer experience through a physical or a virtual front door. So again, this is not a compliance check. This is let's try it out. And it's an area to help make progress on design enhancements in your local workforce systems. And it's kind of testing out the concept that the Governor's Commission on Workforce Equity and Access specifically talked about. So the draft concept that you would spell out in your MOU template commitments looks at, you know, what can you do to pay close attention and be very intentional about the customer experience. So that could be career navigators, which we know some of you already have that in place. So talk about that in your MOU in this section. That could be ways that you're promoting cross-training or cross-program knowledge, which we know we attempt to do, but sometimes, you know, what do we really mean by cross-training? If you could talk about that, if you're looking at ways to improve that, to make sure your partners know about what else is available through the local workforce system, talk about that in your MOUs. And the last one is, what real commitments are you trying to make around accessible technology? Some of you, again, already have that. So just describe it. And these are all examples of working towards physical or virtual front door, whatever that looks like in the future. This is just reminding you that you're not going to get dinged for compliance if you can't make, you know, very specific commitments yet, or if you at least talk about it and you say we're working on it, elevate any issues that you would need, or maybe you need support in order to make better progress on that. Put that in your MOU, and that signals to the state and the interagency TA team particularly, is there something that we could work with other partners in building professional development or resources in future years of the MOU. It's a good way to kind of indicate where we are as a state on this virtual versus physical front door. This is the fifth concept, and this is just an update for your existing practice of submitting the MOU in a final version by May 31st. It's simply a change to say, turn in your one-stop operator agreement, whether it's new or whether it's been in place for a few years, it doesn't matter. When you turn in your final MOU, turn in your one-stop operator agreement at the same time. It really helps expedite the state level review process because they refer back and forth to each other. It also allows the state interagency technical assistance team or any other group provide technical assistance to you because we understand what your one-stop operator agreement says. In the past, they've not always been turned into the state. So this is helpful just, again, to help you make sure your one-stop operator agreements are in compliance. And that is coming straight out of U.S. Department of Labor monitoring of the state in the past and specific requirements for a corrective action plan around one-stop operator agreements. So by you turning in your one-stop operator agreements, it helps make sure that you're compliant, it helps make sure the state is compliant, and we can help you kind of bring your agreements up to par if needed. It also just makes sense because the one-stop operator agreement plays such a significant role in coordination and referrals that really do matter for how you integrate your services. So they should be very closely related, and it helps if you turn them in at the same time so we can help you out with that. So this is the last concept that I'll highlight today. It has not changed since October 12th and relates to electronic signatures, which is the same as in prior years, but we highlight it again because we know signatures take a lot of time and not your favorite thing to do in the world, but there's a lot of requirements around them. And that is because the MOU is treated as a contract for payment through the Illinois Comptroller's Office. And the Illinois Comptroller's Office has to have certain requirements met before those MOUs can be authorized to make payments of what the partners, the state level partners, owe to other partners and those shared costs. So the Comptroller's Office does this because it has to comply with the Electronic Commerce Security Act. They don't have a lot of wiggle room around electronic signature formats when they're treating this as a contract for payment. So this is just a reminder that the guidance for PY23 provides and repeats what you need to do for either electronic signatures or ink signatures. But the bottom line is, from the Interagency Technical Assistance team's point of view, ink signatures really are just the safest and the safest way to make sure that you don't have to regather signatures. So we recommend actually using ink signatures as much as you can in this day and age. And I guess the last incentive to do that is to make sure that your payments are not delayed through the comptroller's office. So that's the why. The other why. Okay, now I'm going to shift to the more practical of the MOU template and just show you the differences, just so you know how these concepts that I just described are actually applied in the document you're going to start to fill out in January. And I'm going to show you some of the red line edits. I know many of you have worked in the MOU template for years. We're showing you the red line edits just so you can tell the differences. And again, hopefully highlight some of the ways that we are trying to make your lives a little easier. In this section, section 2 of the MOU relates to the duration of the MOU as an agreement between the partners. And in this section, what we're trying to say in this coming MOU template is, rather than writing long paragraphs of text, just tell us the very basic facts that's included in red font here. What's the effective date? What's the effective date of any future amendment when you get there? What's the termination date? What's the purpose of the umbrella MOU? And any other additional explanation that you think is necessary so that all the partners agree on what this MOU is doing. And you can communicate to the state how you're all agreeing. That's fine. You can add extra if you want, but we at least need to know what's in the red font. MOU section 3 relates to the vision for the system. And these red line edits are to show that, what we're trying to remove from the MOU template. It's one example of trying to make your lives a little easier. In this section, to be honest, over the past few years or maybe more, it really included a lot of fluff, and it wasn't doing anyone a lot of good. It might have been wasting a little energy. So what we're saying here in this PY23 is that, get to the dot, just to describe, as this dot point on the screen says, describe the shared vision for the system and the role of the local board and the required partners in this high quality service delivery system. So just describe the vision here. We don't need to go into anything else. So just stick to the basics of what your partners agree is the vision for your local system. This is section 4 of the MOU template, and this is where the service integration action plan comes into play. Again, the section is not new, it's been there, but the language is just outdated. So what we're saying is just continue to update this section as you update your service integration action plans. The note at the bottom there in red font is that this section in particular is probably where future changes will be required once the Governor's Commission on Workforce Equity and Access issues its recommendations, and once the IWIB Service Integration Work Group issues its recommendations, or anything else that evolves, as we're thinking about the human-centered design. This section is probably where it's going to come into play. So now this section is going to stay here for now. Just update, any new commitments around service integration action plans, but just know that this section is probably where we can see some future changes. Section 5 of the MOU focuses on the actual development process of the MOU and the good faith negotiations that we know occur. The red font indicates some streamlining of the language, removing some redundancies of the dot points. If you remember the MOU template, every dot point is supposed to have some kind of content related to it in your narrative. So if there's a dot point about it, respond directly to that dot point. By removing one of the dot points at the bottom, it's just hopefully removing some of the redundancies of your paragraphs. Again, that's a learning through all these reviews that the state has done over the past few years, hopefully clarifying what is expected of you in the dot point that's there. The new red font differentiates the process if a consensus is not reached during the MOU negotiations, and it applies to any time throughout the program year. And that's where I said, describe and talk about the role of the leaseholder, describe and talk about the one-stop operator or the local workforce board, other state agencies. Make sure those roles are clear. That's where you put that in your MOU template this coming year. MOU section 7 is required to describe the services that will be offered through the comprehensive one-stop center. That comes straight from the law. It's also the section that we've gotten complaints about in the past because it included writing paragraphs of text for every party to the MOU. And it created some traps or some issues with inconsistencies between the narrative and the big paragraphs that your partners write versus the check boxes that you check later in the service integration, career service matrices that are attached to the MOU. So the original language was also confusing about what you were supposed to do. So the revisions here are just intended to simplify the directions. Explain the check boxes that you put in the matrix. Describe the staffing plan for delivering the services that you checked in the matrix. And then reassure how your program is going to make all services accessible through regular business hours to make so that you're compliant, so that even if you have a 0.25 FTE committed for your program, you're still going to make services available during all regular business hours. Explain that here. So just this dot points are rewritten just to call that out more specifically. Say those three things. MOU section 8 relies to programmatic accessibility, again, which comes from the regulations. This is the section, that big red box in the right-hand corner says this is a pilot for PY23. That's what I mentioned. This is not a compliance section yet. It's just an area to help you talk through the virtual versus physical front door. And, you know, this is again where you describe if you have any of these things already in place, like career navigators or cross training, put that here. If you don't, tell us what you need in order to pursue that. MOU section 11 deals with the referrals. And again, this is rooted in the WIOA regulations. But the long paragraphs of text by partner, again, were a source of, challenge for you in the past. And it wasn't really efficient or effective in documenting both in this section and in another section of the career service matrices. There was some inconsistencies, again, setting you up for a little bit of challenges there. So we're trying to simplify that a little bit and just focus on the one-stop operator's role in coordinating referrals and local coordination. So let the referral system matrix speak for itself, and just in this section, just focus on the one-stop operator's role in coordinating referrals. Just a couple more sections. The MOU section 12 deals with shared data and information. This red line edit just removes a redundancy, and it was unclear requirement around it involves service integration and sharing data about customers and services back and forth between partners. But in the end, it really was unclear because there was already a section in section 4 of the MOU template that dealt with service integration. So we're just removing that from here so that you deal with everything in service integration in section 4. And this section is simplified to just tell us how are you going to exchange information with your partners to make sure that you collectively meet the performance measures and your local goals. That's it. MOU section 14 relates to the amendment procedures. And again, this language comes straight from the law and the regulations. And unfortunately, the law is unclear. The way that the law and the regulations describe amendments versus renewals has always been unclear. So we're trying to wrestle with that in the MOU template. But this red line edit tries to clarify the best we can. Describe your procedures for amending the MOU annually to attach the one-stop operating budget. That's number 1. Number 2, describe amending the MOU anytime changes occur within the term of the MOU over those 3 years. So hopefully that will help. And this is the last section I'll highlight. The MOU section 18 lists all of the attachments that you're required to submit with your MOUs, and this year it'll be by May 31st. The red font indicates the new requirement to just simply attach your one-stop operator agreement. And this is the slide we're happiest to share with you. The MOU template in the past has included a local service matrix, which has 3 parts. That career services, you have to check all the blue boxes of what career services your program is going to offer. That still stays. The other programs and activities available through the Comprehensive One-Stop Center. So maybe they're not technically career services, but you make them available through the One-Stop Center. That checkbox still stays. What's going is what's on this slide. The service integration, or I'm sorry, the service delivery method by partner. There were 3 columns that you had to fill out. It's totally redundant to what you already put in your narrative. It caused problems for inconsistency. There's really no point to doing this anymore. So we're removing just this piece of the service matrix. So the career services checkboxes still stay. The programs, other programs and activities still stay, but this table goes. Hopefully, again, to just make your lives just a little bit easier related to that. Okay, I'm just going to close by offering a few tips about the one-stop operating budget spreadsheet. It's sometimes called the MOU budget. It also contains the infrastructure funding agreement, which is really required by the law, but it also adds the shared service delivery system costs that are, applicable to anywhere in the local workforce system. That's also required by law. So I'm just going to offer a few highlights, and then if needed, we're happy to share our screens and show you the details. But the good news of that big one-stop operating budget spreadsheet is not changed since last year. The only thing that changed is the date applicable to the new program year. That's it. So we still want you to download the one-stop operating budget spreadsheet from this link at the bottom here from the portal. So still download the new one because you never know what bugs had to be fixed from prior years. But overall, the spreadsheet is the same. The tips related to this, just having gone through reviews of your current MOUs, don't change the formulas or the formulae in the spreadsheet. That just causes issues. It causes a domino effect that we can help you out fix, but just try not to change the formula. Next is remember to fill in the notes at the bottom of each tab of the spreadsheet. Those notes really help explain the high level information in the top. And it also helps confirm that your MOU narrative is clear about the commitments made by each partner. And then the bottom one is there is a tab related to the one-stop operator costs related to the one-stop operator agreement. What is the budget in that agreement? And it carries it out and flows through to show how those costs are shared among the partners. And that tab, if you remember from last year's guidance, is required as part of the corrective action plan to make sure that it's very clear how partners are paying for the one-stop operator. That's, again, coming from the U.S. Department of Labor corrective action plan. So please do it. And if you don't, then we'll have to help you do it. That's okay. If you have questions, let us know, but you have to do it. So just general tips, and then we'll open it up for question and answer. Review your reopening plans, see if you need to make any updates. We know during the pandemic, there were very special circumstances and about whether in-person services would be available and whether by appointment only and which partners were present versus which partners were virtual. As your partners continue to make changes, those reopening plans are still relevant. The purpose of that reopening plan is to guide you through the questions you should talk through to make clear, what services are accessible in what way as you're changing your service delivery method. The other is the new MOU template is posted today, available for download. Use that. Don't just copy and paste from a different program year. Download a new MOU template. It'll save you a lot of headaches to make sure that you are covering the right content. Utilize the most recent budget template. Again, it's already on the portal. it hasn't changed, but still download a new one just to make sure that you're not using an old one from your old system that has some kind of bug in it. And then last one is submit your one-stop operator agreements once you submit your final MOU. And all of that and the documents and the templates are available on this link down here, which is an active link. It's called the WIOA Implementation Portal. There's a Documents and Updates webpage. It's under access here. I can show you. So if you go to the main WIOA Implementation Portal, this is what it looks like. Down here, one-stop activities. You click on that. That takes you to all the governor's guidelines, supporting documents, all the MOU required documents and appendix items, everything you need to support your one-stop operator agreements. So this is everything we talked about today is located on this single page. And they're fillable forms available for download. Okay, so that is the end of our explanation. The last piece is just inviting you to use the WIOA plan at illinoisworknet.com email address anytime throughout the program year. It's the same email address where you can submit questions. You can ask for technical assistance. This is where you submit your report of outcomes and your preliminary budget, which again is due April 14th this coming year. Any waiver requests any point throughout the year are submitted to that inbox, and your final submittals of all the documents that you're required to submit. That's the same email address. So I'm happy to open it up for questions now. I'm going to look over here at the chat box. And then after we go kind of exhaust our options in the chat box, then we'll open it up by phone. If anyone is just joining by phone, we'll give you a chance to ask your question live. So I'm going to start here.
But Bethany.
Oh, go ahead, Drew.
Well,
go ahead.
Real quick, someone put a question into the question and answer box that I was going to address.
Thank you.
So they asked if we could put together a document ahead of time that would list common areas where we've noted issues in the past, and we can certainly do that. I will say for this year, as you can probably tell, Section 10 regarding the one-stop operator was an area where we had a lot of findings. But we can look over the past few years and kind of put together a common places where people have required revisions for folks, so you can be extra cautious when filling those out. Yeah, we can certainly put that. We can kind of treat it like an FAQ. So we'll make sure that that's circulated with any FAQ that comes out of this webinar. Thanks, Drew. Okay, I see, and Drew put the link in the chat box for those who want to click on that and just kind of look at the website. And the other question I see in the chat box is, with the submission deadline moved up to May 31st in 2023, that local area's one-stop operator agreement, the new one, will not be fully executed by then. So can they submit a draft version or pending agreement with the MOU? And the answer is yes. Just submit your draft version and say that it's draft. That's fine. And then once it's settled and final, then you can submit it again to that same WIOA inbox. That's perfectly fine. Okay, I welcome any other questions in the chat box first.
There's another one in the Q&A, Drew, if you want to address that.
Yeah, Drew, if you want, I can take that one. I see it, the negotiator, the MOU negotiator that this local area has used in the past as through a contract arrangement is not available this coming year. And the partners in the local area agreed that they would work together to negotiate the MOU. Is that acceptable? Yes. So the local workforce board can appoint someone to be the lead MOU negotiator, and it can be a partner. where it gets a little more sensitive is around the budget, making sure that that person can be impartial or a separate person. It could be a separate person who's impartial enough to help negotiate the budget. That's what's key, Steve. So as long as your partners agree and as long as the local workforce board thinks that the lead MOU negotiator and an impartial budget negotiator can ensure good faith negotiations, then that's okay. Yep. And Drew's answering a question now for the electronic signature guidance. We did use an acronym. I apologize. The IOC means the Illinois Office of the Comptroller. So it just means the Comptroller's office. Okay. Are there any other questions? Please feel free. Are the wet signatures required in blue ink? No, it doesn't matter if they're blue or black ink. You're welcome. Kirsten, would you like to open up the phone lines in case anyone who joined by phone would like to ask a question?
Yeah, so if you would like to ask a question live, feel free to raise your hand on Zoom, which is an icon that says it's a hand, it says raise hand, it's on the Zoom toolbar. It should be on your Zoom toolbar. You can click that and then I can unmute you. I don't see anybody raising their hand, Bethany, as of right now.
Okay. Well, I think we're okay to close then, unless there's any other questions that pop up while I'm kind of making my closing comments. We'll answer them, but just want to thank you. We know you work hard. We know you have a lot going on always. We know that there's a lot required of you according to the law, and then Illinois wants to help you support service integration in a meaningful way. So we understand, and hopefully the revisions of this year's MOU template, although they're technical in nature, hopefully they just remove a little bit of a headache at a time. And we'll look forward to working with you on future years of the MOU and the guidance for successful agreements and meaningful change. So thank you all. Please look forward to the email that Kirsten's going to send out about the a survey and then the FAQ and anything else that's following up. So thank you. And also watch for a recording in case anyone who couldn't attend today, the recording will be available and you can share it with your staff or anyone else who will participate in the MOU negotiations. Drew, is there anything else you would add?
Nope. Someone had just asked, and we've got this question a couple of times about sending the slides. So we will, when we communicate back out, send the slide deck to folks.
Yep. The follow-up email will include a copy of the slides, of course. Yep. No problem. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day. Have a great weekend and the rest of the month. Thank you.